Hi, this is James Clarkson from MAXSURF Technical Support. Now, I've seen a few models recently where users have gone and made some very complex setups uh, for doing boundary surfaces for complex tanks, and it doesn't need to be um, particularly complex. So I thought I'd just walk through what we need to do, and uh, so you've got a better idea of it. Sorry, curves, linear curve here. So I'm just going to create a boundary tank like this. Uh, Everything's locked, so just my curve is there. And then I can extrude that 80 meters forward. Let's take a quick look at that in my perspective view here. So that's what I'm looking at. Now, actually, I think I'd like to put a bit of shape in there so it tapers towards the forehead end. Maybe it needs to go further forward before I do that. So here we can see that it's sticking outside of my hull. So I'm going to add another column of control points here. And that we can see it's gone and tried to put in a row column instead. They're the wrong way around. So let me transpose that. Swap column axes. Control A is my shortcut for adding. Now with my net on, I can see that's all nice and square. These ones can come inboard. So now it's not sticking out through my hull, oh, it is a tiny bit there. Okay, so that's the shape of my interface between my inner tanks and my wing ballast tanks. Now, so if I want to create a tank on the inboard side here, then let me lock everything. If I want to make a tank on the inboard side here, then I can do it with just using this one boundary surface, and MAXSURF can close one gap. So it'll know where to close that one gap. And with this, it'll be a port and starboard side surface in stability, but yeah, we'll be able to create that inner tank with these chamfered edges. But for creating this outer tank, we need to go and create some dummy surfaces that will run outside the model so we can specify where this tank goes. So I'm going to keep using that extrude command here, render off so I can select the edges of surfaces. All right, let's go 10 meters outboard, should put me well beyond the hull. This time -15 downwards. I'll check in a minute if that was far enough. Surface, extrude surface, and transverse negative. I'm going to go well beyond that center line, and I'll show you why just here. Because I've gone well beyond the center line, it's really easy for me to grab those control points, snap them back to center. Let's have a look. And yeah, as I suspected, sorry, that hasn't quite gone far enough. So let's have a look at what we have here now. These are my dummy surfaces that sit well outside of the hull, and there's my hull. So when I go to create some wing tanks that sit within this region, I'm going to specify my dummy surfaces are the extent to that tank, and MAXSURF will know that those tanks don't stick anywhere beyond the outside of the hull, so can also snap to that limit too. Now the other one that we can do is to specify parameters on the extent, so how far forward or aft each tank can go. So this doesn't need to be separate surfaces for each tank, we can use the same set of boundary surfaces for our port and starboard and for several tanks along the length of the vessel as well. So my final step here is that for these to be boundary tanks, they help so I have a useful name. And we need to set their type to be structure. So for it to be a boundary tank in stability, boundary surface in stability, it needs to have a structure type. Okay, so let me save this and open it up in stability. So here I am now in stability, and you'll see this model, let's leave that there, is currently just my outside sections. Those sections all look like they're formed correctly. It is always worth checking using the arrow keys here, looking at one section at a time and check that every single one of those sections is formed correctly. Okay, so if I turn on display of my structure surfaces, then I can see them there. And I can also see them in my list here. So using the Shift key to select them all, I can select Create Tank from Surfaces. Those surfaces have disappeared. Let me turn on display of my tanks. And that's the extent of our bounding box for that tank. So let me flick across to my tank definition. And we can see that's our tank. And these parameters are the outside of those of this box. Now, when I form this tank, that tank now goes and snaps to the shape inside of our bounding box. Now, we don't want to have one tank that goes port and starboard, one tank that goes the entire length of my hull. So what I'm going to do here is Control A to add some tanks in. And I'm just going to copy these parameters here. So I'm using those same boundary surfaces. If I double click here, you can see those surfaces are selected. And I can change my port and starboard to go from 0 port to 0 starboard, 0 port to 0 starboard. So now when I form it, sorry, I've got too many tanks there. I can go from there to, let's pick a number. Now you'll see as I've been typing these numbers, these sizes and shapes have updated. I can now see I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. And they're all using those boundary surfaces. So when I form them up, I now have my 4 tanks all using the same set of boundary surfaces. I haven't needed to go and define new boundary surfaces for each one. And yeah, so all using the same, but taking up different space in the hull because we've specified different parameters in here. So the two things to take away is, one, don't overcomplicate your model. Don't go creating a new surface for every single tank. New set of boundaries for every single tank. You can do it in one hit. And two, make sure you do have that closed all around volume. Oh, not coming up there. That closed all around volume so that we can create a closed section that goes all the way around those boundary surfaces. Thanks for your time today, and I hope I've made making tanks, complex tanks, just a little bit simpler for you.